Love it. Oh, these are great. Okay, thanks everybody, and thanks for showing up again. I didn't freak you out and scare you away, so it's awesome to see some faces again today, and welcome to our newbies who are here for the first time. Just like yesterday, we're going to run this with some built-in breaks, but if you feel the need to take a bio break on your own accord, just mute mic, mute camera, and step off and do your thing. Yesterday, we really focused on sort of reflecting and setting ourselves up emotionally with some psychological safety in order to take a good look at what's ahead for us as we move into this next phase of Vanguard, or if you're not Vanguard and you're of the other group, sort of into this next phase of coaching and leading others, and having really specific conversations and interactions with people that are around their own growth and development. So I'm really excited to dig in today. And I wanted to start just by refreshing your brain back to when you first started with Vanguard Team, those of you who are Vanguardians that are joining us. And when I was debriefing with Amy and Eric yesterday, they reminded me that you all are the first group that has come through that was actually coached by Vanguard, and now it's sort of coming around full circle. So I want to start our time today sort of in that place where you remember what it's like to be the coached. Because I think, and I'm going to kind of have some salient points for you guys today, but this is point number one of today and this afternoon's talk. Empathy is key, period. In all the work that I've done as a coach and in all the work I've done in leading coaches, the minute that we leave empathy out of the equation, we become really ineffective. So point one, empathy is key. And in order to empathize as a coach, you have to remember what it's like to be the coached. Right? In order to be an effective coach, you have to be really reflective about how you felt and the process of being coached. And so we're going to start today just in that. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. As with yesterday, love it or hate it, makes you nauseous or not, we're going to jump back into my whiteboarding because this is just a way that I really like to capture things for people to see visually. And let me dismiss this. Okay, so I know people like to do this thing where they're like, we don't like pros and cons. Cons feels negative. Let's not be negative. But to be factual, sometimes things just are gross. They make us feel bad. They're not great. Like, we shouldn't do them anymore. So as we're reflecting about how you felt as a coachee, right, the recipient of coaching, and the interactions that you had with your Vanguard coach, we're going to put things into buckets, just like we've been doing, right? What were the things that you loved about that? And it doesn't have to be a specific interaction. It can be the way that they made you feel. It can be a way that you really engaged with them or built a relationship with them. It can also be one of those things where it was like, you know, bummed out, thumbs down, because we did not have enough time, or we didn't meet enough or with regularity enough for me to really feel like, you know, I wanted that. I wanted more. That can be a negative too. So this is going to sort of be our warm-up activity today. We're going to pounce out into breakout rooms to do this because I think the conversation is actually really good. And Eric, if you don't mind, will you add me to a breakout this time so I can just listen in? We're not going to necessarily like T-chart this when we get back, but I would like people to share out. So nose goes in your group for who's going to report back, just some of the highlight reel. But let's have let's actually do about 10 minutes of good conversation around how it felt to be coached by Vanguard and what were some of the highlights and some of the things that, you know, you maybe shift differently. Hey, everybody, welcome back. How's it going? That's a fast 10 minutes. I'm not going to lie to you. I hope you had enough time to kind of give sort of the Cliff's Notes version of your coaching experience. And I am going to remain anonymous as to which group I was participating with, but I was really proud of the way that they were able to see sort of the glimmers, even out of the things that might have been, you know, not maybe necessarily delivering full capacity, were really just moments for them to lean in and say, actually, because I had this experience, this is maybe something I need to address moving forward as I step into coaching myself. So really proud of that sort of claiming an intention on it, even if it wasn't the best experience, because it's all learning, right? It's all an example, and we either repeat the example or we use that example to disrupt our own practice. So really good job. Curious if folks would be able to come off mic and maybe just give me the distilled version of, based on all my experience, here's something I'm packing with me in my carry-on to move forward as a coach, or here's something I'm leaving at the airport terminal, right? Like just one point. Go ahead.
So my group, the thing that I don't remember the analogy you just used, but that we're packing and getting rid of, would be to make sure there was follow-up, not following up. That's what we would be getting rid of, not having follow-up. But a couple things that we wanted to make sure we did, regardless of whether it happened for us or not, was have communication and checking in on our mentees to see what they need.
Yeah, I think that was something resounding that came back from all of mine, was like a scheduled check-in. That was both something that was viewed as really positive when there was a regular cadence that was set up for that. And then there was also this like thumbs down when COVID hit. They backed off when I really needed them to push in. So on both sides of that, I think maintaining a regular cadence is really important, rather than a grab me if you need me kind of approach, right? But we can kind of enter into that, especially if we know the person, right? And in a district the size of Frederick, the likelihood that you may know the person that you're going to be sort of partnered up with is relatively high. I mean, you might have heard of them or at least seen them or know similar people. And so that can be a little too much of a fluffy comfort blanket where we don't want to get into a weird space in a friendship or in a colleague relationship. And so we just say like, okay, well, I'm here to help. Let me know if you have anything you need me to work on, right? And it's like this really weird circle yes or no, do you want to go to the dance with me, kind of a weird feeling that we get with people that we know more closely. Whereas when we feel like we're walking in and we don't have that relationship, we can set expectations differently. So I would encourage you, even if you know that person, to like acknowledge it up front and say, actually, yeah, I know this is going to be a little weird for you and for me until we negotiate how this relationship works. But like, let's use all that rapport we have and just cut through it and get straight to the point where we can be really truthful and honest with one another, rather than it being an impediment, right? Which I think is really good. Okay, Courtney, I see your hand up. Go ahead.
Great, thank you. So we talked a lot about how at the end of last year, with the circumstances we were under, we felt like we had really like lost our coach and didn't really know like where we had left things. Like, is it okay if I ever reach out to you again? Or like, once this year's over, like, is that relationship over? And a lot of ambiguity there, which, you know, I agree. It's like, well, that comes with setting expectations from the beginning on like what this relationship looks like. And we also talked a lot about how for several of us in the group, this year has felt a lot more challenging than last year. And so really like wondering, like, can I reach back out to my coach in this leadership role, or is that like not an appropriate use of that relationship?
Mm-hmm. That's a good point too. Yeah. So when in doubt, fire off the email, right? And I think you will realize as you step into the role of coach too, that sometimes you wish that people would keep you updated or keep you in the loop. And even if it's just a quick question like, hey, do you have a resource for this? Those are actually sometimes the moments of balm over all of the other stuff that's like really hard about being a coach, where you like put your heart out there and then people trample it sometimes. But those moments when people reach out to you again and say like, hey, I really valued this experience with you, and I'd love to have, you know, just a quick, you know, noodle session where we can put our brains together is really great. So encourage that as you step into that role. I think that's a great learning. Good. Go ahead, Laura.
Hi. So our group talked about some similar things in terms of things to leave behind and not pack with us. Just assuming because you're friends and because you know each other, like you were saying, don't assume that, you know, they've got it or that they know what they're doing and they don't need help, because you know that they're an awesome teacher and they're awesome at what they do. Like, don't assume that they don't need that support. And in terms of what to bring with them, we talked about a coach that took the time to just sit in. It was actually my coach. She took the time to just really sit in my space and really understand where I was coming from and what my position is and what kind of supports I need. And she was able to give me the support I needed because she took the time to really understand where I'm coming from.
Yeah, that's great. And I think that's part of empathizing with somebody, right? Which, you know, again, point one, empathy is key, but it's also that relationship and rapport. We're going to jump here in a minute to talk about like partnership philosophy and like what that is. But without knowing somebody and valuing who they are, their circumstances, the what and how and why of teaching for them, it's really hard to be an effective coach. And you know, sort of like sub point to point one, listening, actively listening, not to have an answer, which is hard because as a coach, you assume that people want you to just give them what they should do next, right? Active listening to learn and understand and not provide a response is 75 to 80% of what you're going to do as a coach, is active listening. And so I think that that's a really important way for you to sort of set your schedule, set your cadence, back to that other point, set up listening sessions, right? Where you're just listening, like, you know, give me the top 5 things that made you crazy this week, or like, you know, give me the 2 things that you're so happy with how they went, or moments where you really like remembered why you love what you do, right? So listening and sort of being able to tease out those pieces from people, super, super big. Great. Anybody else with hand up? I don't see one. Okay, go ahead, Melissa.
So I wanted to, of course, my group talked about similar things. And I think mine is kind of related to what you were just saying. We thought it was really beneficial when the coach was able to actually visit the classroom. And I think this year was, you know, really just so unfair. I feel like that COVID reduced coaches and 30-year teachers back to first-year teachers. And so I understand how the relationships fell off. I think we were all kind of drowning for a little while. Sure. But I think making an effort to actually go see them in their space and see, visit their classroom is something that we would love to keep and hopefully be able to do. The same things, we talked about the same things, feedback, that not knowing whether their coach is too busy, you know, take into account, sometimes we know about their personal life, they have young kids or something of that nature, and we kind of feel like we don't want to be a burden. And so if your coach isn't reaching out, then you feel like they are busy, they are too busy, you know, it is a problem. So I think that's something that we would want to leave, like everybody else said.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think too, like the other side of that is to make a commitment as you enter into those relationships with people coming up next year to really say, set your parameter and set your barrier, but set your intention as well, right? To be really clear about that and say, I know you may feel at times like you're busy, like I'm busy, like you're a burden, but this is really important to me. I'm prioritizing the time that we spend together. And so have a good communication valley that you can get into where maybe it's not as disruptive as like a phone call at 12 at night, right? But like, you know, something where they feel like they have a bat signal they can throw up for you, but it's a little bit more passive than like an urgent request, right? So however you set that up, I think is really important. But I agree with you. We all got a little robbed here. And so, you know, I think assuming the very best interpretation, the most generous interpretation of everyone's efforts over the last year is really important. So even if the relationship and the interactions that you had with the person that was coaching you were not idyllic, although some of what I heard was kind of idyllic, like having a brunch and blended learning session to get to know everybody and collaborate, right? Like there's some really great things that I heard were happening, but I also know that even when it's not idyllic, there's positive intention. And again, you would want that lavished onto you. I know you will next year when you're in this position. Because again, like for most of us that step into the role of coach, it's just because we're good at what we do, right? So let me underline that and like double click on that for a second. becoming a coach for many of us in education only happens because we're good at what we do. It's not because we have formalized training necessarily in what effective coaching looks like. It's not even because we've got like a passion driven to become a career coach, so to speak, not coaching people to career, but like that as your lifetime goal and sort of job description. It's because you're good at what you do. And in education, what we do when we see people that are good at what we do, we're like, oh, I need to retweet that. How do I get that out and like cross-pollinate that amazing practice to other people? So that was really the inception of Vanguard when I was sort of coming up into it, was that we've got like all these great practices happening in small pockets across a very big district in Fulton County. How do we cross-pollinate all of that good practice? Well, let's talk about it in groups. Let's get it out of the, you know, closed classroom doors and put it out in the open, but then let's challenge people to go out and share some of that knowledge and just be a sounding board for others. And that was really the inception of how Vanguard started. And I think it's really important to keep that at the heart of it and to give yourself a little bit of grace when you don't know how to necessarily proceed through these things, and also when you've experienced coaching from others. So what I'd like to spin into now is to share, it's just a 5-minute conversation around partnership philosophy from this past January. Now, if anyone has been in coaching for any period of time, and I'm sure this will be a part of resources that Amy has sort of put together. I know you guys had lots of questions in my breakout about like, what are the expectations? Like, what are we supposed to be doing? And thankfully, the answers will be provided to you. Ask and you shall receive, right? And so it's a little premature for those deep, detailed questions to be answered, but we can cast a big net around what coaching means. And I want to do that before we move into some of the tactical things that I'm going to provide you with today that'll help get you set and moving forward. So Jim Knight is a guy, and he's like the guy of instructional coaching. And if there were a fan club, I would be a charter member and possibly the secretary. Like, I don't have time for president level, but like I would be there because he really does synthesize things in a way that make them really sort of, you know, easy to understand and digest. But he's academic, so he has like the research chops that are also everybody wants. So I'm going to go ahead and share this video. Again, it's 5 minutes, and I think it'll be really worthwhile for everybody. So let me go ahead.
Today, and over the next 7 weeks following this week, I want to talk about some ideas that stand at the heart of what we do and what I call the partnership principles. It's important, I think, to think through not just what you do, but the principle. What's the way of being, as Christian Van Nuremberg says, and what are the actions behind what we do. And I think if your actions don't line up with your expectations for your work, it's going to be a bit of a challenge. So I just wanted today just give you a quick overview of where these ideas came from, what the research was, and what I think the big issue is. And then we'll look at each week a different principle. The partnership principles really grew out of my academic work, starting back when I was a pretty crappy student. I had 2 years in university, and
Stephanie, can you unmute? I'm sorry.
oh, sorry. I read this
Sorry,
as a 20-year-old.
you hearing it now?
And what it said about positioning people as partners in learning, engaging in dialogue, seeing the other person as a person, to be fully seen as a complete human being, really spoke to me as truth. And as you can see, almost every page looks like this. I've read the book multiple times. This is the original copy I got back sometime like a long time ago, 70s. After this book, I set it aside and I started to study English and became an English teacher, worked in community college. Actually thought I was going to be an English professor. But then I got fascinated by education, what worked and what didn't work. I started to do professional development, and people loved the materials that I shared, which came from the University of Kansas. I was living in Canada. But nobody implemented. And I became consumed with the issue of, well, how the heck do you get implementation? At that time, working at the University of Toronto was Michael Fullan, probably the world's leading expert on educational change. So I took advantage of him, I guess, a little bit. I went to the University of Toronto, took one of his classes, and then asked if I could do an independent study with him, and he graciously spent a lot of time with me, walking me through all of his work and other people's work. At that time, he was writing a great book called Change Forces, and I read parts of that book as it was being developed, and then he gave me some other things to read. For example, Peter Senge's Fifth Discipline came out in 1990. I think that's a seminal book in understanding how organizations function, but it also shared the idea of dialogue, which is the mode of discourse of a partnership. Senge's book I read, and I ended up reading other books along the way. I read, for example, Peter Block, who Michael got me thinking about. He had me read the book that came out before this, but when I found Stewardship and read it, it was almost as powerful as reading Paulo Freire's work. And what he had me thinking about now was the whole idea of partnership. And that led me to Rianne Eisler. I was lucky enough to learn from her and work from her a little bit and do a couple workshops with her. And Rianne had me I read everything she wrote, but this book in particular, The Chalice and the Blade, is really kind of making the anthropological case for partnership as opposed to a dominator society. Instead of winners and losers, let's function as partners, men and women, equal in a relationship. But at the same time, Senge got me reading this book. As you can see, I've read it pretty carefully. William Isaac's book, Dialogue, a great book about the concept of dialogue. And in combination, these with many other books led me to articulate the partnership principles, which were first written in instructional coaching, and then came out in Unmistakable Impact. So reading these books and many others about change, especially Michael Pollan's work and other people's work, I wanted to articulate a set of principles, but then I needed to figure out how to study them. So I did a study, and if you're reading this on the blog, there'll be a paper you can download that summarizes that partnership approach went with self-questioning. And the act.
I'm just skipping ahead really quickly to the final pieces here.
How much people enjoy the impact schools, all that work goes back to the partnership.
Top-down
treatment of teachers.
Okay, here we go.
The core idea here, why is this a big issue? Well, to me, the way forward in schools is not to have more top-down treatment of teachers. We can't bully teachers into better schools. What we need to do is we need to treat teachers like professionals. To get the schools our kids deserve, we need to treat teachers like professionals. And I believe to treat teachers like professionals, we have to position them as partners. We have to work according to the partnership principles. Now, one of the principles is choice. It'd be kind of funny if I said, you have to believe in this, you have no choice. You're going to have to look at each principle and say, do I or don't I agree with that? But I'll make my case. I'll share with you the ideas. And you're free to use these videos if you like, just to provoke discussion. But I hope.
Okay, so that's exactly what I'm doing. I'm sharing this video to provoke some discussion. And I'm going to share with you guys on all of the download of our materials, the whole series, where you can go through each principle if you haven't seen that already. And Amy might already have that in her stack of stuff inside of the coaching portfolio that you'll get. But I put a few notes here in the chat as he was talking. And I hope you were able to kind of tease out these key learnings. When I say partnership principles and partnership philosophy, that's the number one thing that I can point to as a model for how I coached, how we guided the Vanguard team in Fulton County to be coaches, and how I also supported my staff at I Teach to be coaches. And the partnership philosophy is this. In one simple statement, I have as much to learn as I have to show. Okay, so in every relationship, as a coach, it's a simple phrase, but it really is so key to what the partnership approach means. As you get partnered up with somebody for next year, you have to continually remind yourself, I have as much to learn as I have to show. And that's my second point for today. As a coach, we have to keep that posture. We have to keep a partnership posture for two reasons, really. One, because we're not punitive. We don't have evaluative control or priority over any of the folks that we're going to be partnered up with, right? That goes back to the partnership versus dominator society. We want a partnership with them. We don't want to dominate them. So it's really essential because of that factor. And the other reason why is because it keeps us in a state of being a learn-it-all as a coach rather than a know-it-all. If you're a learn-it-all, you can really allow yourself to say to somebody in the coaching conversation, actually, I'm not sure what I would do in that situation. Let me go back and digest this and think about it a little bit, search for some resources, and let's come at this again tomorrow or the next day. right? A know-it-all would say, well, here's what I would do, and just come up with something arbitrary on the fly because they didn't want to be seen as someone who didn't know everything, because they should be dominating and leading and coaching. A partnership philosophy actually allows us to say we don't know everything, but we know the right approach to take to find answers, and we have great resources, and we've got a good partnership here that we can bounce ideas off of. So the other things that he really built that case around partnership principles and partnership philosophy around were that there's inherent value in every individual. And that's part of the basis for my life's work around personalized learning, and how I feel like if we can create these situations and these realities between coach and educator, where you're getting a personalized experience, where someone's conferencing with you and asking you questions and actually cares about the answers, right? You have goals that are really your goals that are empowered by a coach and a facilitator. Then what we're doing for people is actually activating in them what it feels like to receive a personalized approach to learning and growth. And you know what happens when people get a model? They produce the model back again. Right? So in a nefarious way, a partnership philosophy and that way of coaching will lead to much deeper ties towards a blended environment, which can get us closer to personalized learning over time. Right? So I know that he's not the most like riveting of speakers, right? He's a cute little dorky guy with glasses and kind of is monotone. Show me an academic that's not, right? But I think that he has a really strong basis in research, in education theory, and it's built as he built you the case, right? It's built over Fier, it's built over all these really great thinkers and doers and researchers to come down to this point where he says, treat teachers like professionals. Why does that seem like such a whoa, mind-blowing thing, right? I saw people's heads shaking as he said that, like, oh yeah, that sounds good, we should do that. Well, of course we should. But that hasn't happened historically, right? Especially when it comes for time for professional development. And we've all been guilty of committing this sort of sin over time, right? You come into a room, you all sit down, you get the same required training, you get up and you never think about it again, right? It's like that plug and play, same day, same way approach that we don't want to happen in classrooms, but we then do it to teachers. You all have the power to disrupt that. You all have the power to treat one another as professionals and also authorize each other as people who have great ideas, and you can learn from each other inside of this partnership. So it's actually like a really invigorating moment if you claim that power in this coaching relationship to be that learn-it-all and to model great behavior when it comes time for teachers to go back into their classrooms and try to put some of these things in place for their own students as well. So I want to pause for about 5 minutes and let you react to this sort of moment, this partnership philosophy, react to something that you heard, Jim Knight say, react to something that you heard me say. Let's open it up for reactions. You guys are really polite with your hands raised, but you can also just come off of mute.
I was thinking, I think I talked with Eric a few years ago when I first applied to the Vanguard program, and just thinking about, okay, this is great for blended learning. How many other initiatives need to start this way? Like, can this be the new model for starting initiatives if Vanguard is successful, and initiatives that we actually believe in, right? Not, whatever, but how many initiatives have, crashed and burned and failed because of the top-down approach, right? So just some thought.
Yeah, it's a totally valid thought, and I agree with you. And I think, interestingly, that's been something that Fulton and others have used the same model over time, right? So Vanguard was really set out to be this instructional technology lead, this blended learning lead in Fulton County. Well, they moved the goalpost repeatedly. Vanguard has morphed over time to now be personalized learning focused, and that encompasses lots of things, tech and non-tech. But then they also used the same exact model when they rolled out a standards mastery framework. We talked about that yesterday as something that was like, oh, we should maybe think about that model after this last year. Well, Fulton thought about it a couple of years ago, but they realized it's a huge lift, right? Communications, professional learning, prioritizing standards across every content, K-12, that's a huge lift. But they built these SMF superstars that were Standards Mastery Framework superstars. They followed the exact same model, right? They enrolled people that were passionate about it to be the initial small group. Over time, those people worked with folks inside their PLCs and content areas, and they followed that model exactly. So it's a great point, and yes, that happens. And don't be shocked when 5 years from now, there's a different goalpost for you all, or there's another very similar team rolling out the next phase of whatever this work looks like. Who else? Anyone else with reactions to Jim and partnership philosophy?
I really liked that quote about everyone has something to share. I think that like this year in my lead year, it was kind of intimidating, you know, like who am I to be leading people? But when I planned some sessions for my colleagues and made it less like, hey, I'm the expert, come listen to me, and made it more like, hey, how can we brainstorm together to share some ideas to meet this goal? It was much more approachable for me. And I also think it was much more empowering for my colleagues. So I just love that quote, and it's definitely something that I'll keep in mind next year in my coach year. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, and for me, like I said, it's not out of Jim's mouth. It's just sort of my redigestion of what he says. But if you can always approach it from that posture of I have as much to learn as I have to show, you're going to be okay. So what we're going to do now is take a 5-minute bio break. When we come back, we're going to move into a place where we talk about the myths or misconceptions or misperceptions of what coaching looks like. And then I'm going to spend the last chunk of time giving you templates, resources, ideas for how to schedule, resources and books that you might want to think about by poolside over the summer, just some things to kind of percolate you and move you into the next phase. So 5 minutes now will come. A lot of the reason why I focused on personalized learning was for myself, right? I was a kid who was a typical gap kid. And I mean that not in the sense that other people think. I got good enough grades where people stayed off my back. I was plugged in. I was a teacher pleaser. But I never really pushed forward any with momentum because I knew I was doing fine. And until I got to college, I was like a low BC student. Because I wasn't connected. I wasn't plugged in and I didn't care. And so that's what I qualify as a gap kid. I think we lose more kids in that gap than we lose in any other gap, hands down. And I felt as if someone paid attention to me specifically, and it wasn't just busy work and like the hamster wheel, then I probably would have found my abilities sooner. So she's that kid and spent all of elementary school being miscategorized as a kid who needed RTI support. I just this year, her math teacher exited her from that finally. It's carried with her since 2nd grade, and she's been told in a lot of ways that she couldn't do. And this kid, in the middle of a pandemic, in the middle of the transition from 5th to 6th grade, has gotten all A's on her own accord without the help of mom and dad and without the help of anybody else, and just has really found herself because she had people that plugged in and teachers that plugged in and found things about her that were just about her. So what you do really matters because there's lots of jujus in the world, and I know that you've affected some of them. So pre-thank you and post-thank you for all that you're doing because it really makes a difference. Okay, so to piggyback off of Jim Knight sharing his like mad stack of reference materials, I'm going to give you some of mine, and I'm just going to flash them on screen. So consider these like, you know, whatever. If you're lucky enough to have a pool to sit at and chill at this summer and you want to have a book, even if you don't read it and if it's just to hold up so that you can pretend you're not listening to your children when they ask for snacks for the 40th time. These are really great ones. So the first two are actually these are the Habitudes books, but the first one is for communicators and the other one is for leading others. So these two Habitudes books are really great. They're broken up, and I actually, right before I left iTeach, I had my whole leadership team go through both of these together. So for 10 minutes on our weekly sync, we just took one. They're based in images. And then they have a really quick thing to read and then some questions for you to reflect on. So we took one of these images and just worked these through together. So this might be something, if you guys are like devotionals people, or if you have like a, you know, Far Side cartoon a day kind of calendar vibe in your life, these ones are really easy if you just wanted to do one at a time to kind of work your way through. But what I like about them is that the communicators one is really good for tough conversations that you will for sure have as a coach, right? It gives you really practical
reasons why you should think ahead of a conversation about how you want that conversation to go and not be caught off guard. And it gives really good skills. The one for leading others, I know that on paper you don't have like evaluative or punitive or authoritative control over these people, but you are leading them. You've learned that this year. And so in your actions and in your interactions, you're going to be leading others. And there's really great things like what enables a leader to motivate people to action. The number one thing that a coach struggles with is to motivate people to want to work with them. Hands down, it's like how I spend the majority of my time is just enrolling people in the relationship with me. So it's things like people listen to you because of what you know, right? We do want to be knowledgeable and skillful, but you've spent the last 2 years proving that. People listen because of who you know. So talk about who you've worked with, who you know, other teachers you might have in common. You can qualify your relationship that way. So anyway, there's like 9 others. The last one is conviction. People listen because of your passion. That's a really important one. So anyway, these 2 quick references, easy reads, they're cheap on Amazon, whatever. This one, if we haven't all studied this already, then have we been in education ever? And also this may save your marriage. But Crucial Conversations is a really great one. The first time I went through it, I was forced into it and I didn't really glean a lot from it. Because again, if you've picked this up about me, and other people have said it, I'm the punk who does the opposite of what people tell me to do. So when you tell me I have to read a book, I'm basically going to make paper airplanes out of every page. So when I went back on my own and went through this, I really found some good insight. Specifically, if you want to take a note for yourself, if you have this book on your shelf already, I've got a newer version, 2nd edition. On page 98, it talks about mutual respect, and it's got some exclusive video content that models conversations between people. And the mutual respect one definitely goes in line with the partnership philosophy. So check that out if you have it. Have you been a leader if you don't know Simon Sinek? So this is a book called Start With Why. It's the really good, subtle art of active listening. Remember I said earlier, if you can really just focus your time on listening actively, and a good way to do that is to ask qualifying questions after somebody starts. Why is the best question you can ever ask someone? Because it pushes it back to them to describe in their own words, their own feelings, their own experiences, why something might have happened. So yep, the TED Talk is out there. It's a great one. This one is really, really cool. And then the last one I'll share with you is called Thanks for the Feedback. I'm sorry, I took the cover off of it because I was Roy G. Biving my bookshelf and it didn't go where I needed it to. So I needed it to be black. And yes, I did do that. But this one's really great. This one is by Douglas Stone and Sheila Heen. And I can, again, I'll pop the links in afterwards, but it's all about really having great feedback and how to provide great feedback. So when you're coaching someone, often it's really hard to say anything but like, great, love it, cool, awesome job, right? Especially when you're not evaluative or punitive, it can be really hard to find targeted and specific feedback when something is meh. Okay, if something's really gross, you're going to have clear things to say about it. But if it's sort of in that middle ground, it can be hard. So what I would say is, here's another Brené-ism: clear is kind. Be very clear with your feedback, but then learn about feedback and how to give it appropriately. There's also a chapter in here called The Triggers That Prevent Feedback from Being Received Effectively. And like, don't use these things, don't do these things, or people will tune you out before you even get into the meat of the conversation. So that's my quick stack. I think it's 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yep, my top 5 for like sort of the primer. They're not typical coaching books. Everyone knows instructional coaching, or you have now that you've seen Jim Knight talk about it, but that's sort of like the 100 level book. These ones are a little bit more thought-provoking and moving forward. It might be beneficial to you. So I will pause here. I'd love it if you drop it in the chat what book you might be reading this summer that maybe is professional in nature. If not, shoot me your reads anyway. I'm just finishing up The Paris Library. If anyone's read that, that's a pretty good one if you like historical fiction. So pop in the chat a book you plan to read for work or for pleasure. Nice. Ooh, I love Elena Aguilar. Great author. Yeah, Shavana, Okay, what is it? The Home Edit? Is that the name of the show? Like, people keep telling me that I need to watch it because I have an addiction to like Roy G. Biving my life. History of the World in 6 Glasses. That's cool. That sounds like, is that like sort of like Drunk History? Because I love that show. It's one of my favorites. Invisible Life. Oh, I've seen that one on the shelves. Cool, 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 cool. Okay, this is good. All right, so I would consider this group as like a happy little accident of people that you can always reference for what should I read, what should I watch, what should I listen to? And it shouldn't always be about coaching and work and Vanguard stuff, or else that's lame and not fun and nobody will ever ask you again. So always keep it a mix and fortify yourselves with one another. I'm gonna pivot really quickly here and start sharing my screen again because we're gonna get into debunking some myths here now. Let's go this side. Sorry, you're going to see yourselves for a second. Hold, please. I'll move it quickly. People always hate that, myself included. Okay, so back to whiteboard. And we are going to go into myth busting, which first of all is like just a fantastic show. If you guys remember it, it's one of my all-time favorites. Don't you wish you could grow beards like those guys? Although it looks like we do have some. Kevin, you get an A+ for beard effort. Anybody else rocking a great beard? Okay, I'm not. I just had a facial yesterday and a little bit of dermaplaning goes a long way, ladies, if you know what I mean. All right, so myth 1 of coaching. And these are myths that I have heard probably, I don't know, hundreds of times in the decade that I've been involved in coaching. But coaching isn't my full-time job. I don't have time for this. Let me get a retweet, hands up, or clap your hands, or drop drop something in the chat if you feel that or have heard that before. It's for sure true, right? You guys are teaching full-time or leading full-time or have all these other roles in central office. Coaching can feel like the add-on that's just too much to bear. What I can tell you is that when you start to really accumulate the skills of a coach, what you'll end up doing is being a coach all the time in every role you have, in every interaction you have. It's almost like a little bit of like a sickness outbreak that you can, in a good way. For example, the partnership philosophy thing, yes, is important in coaching, but it's also important in your classroom when you're dealing with students, whether they're 5 or they're 15 or they're 50. If you can approach your teaching and learning relationships with the same partnership philosophy, it does you a lot of good. So while yes, coaching is not your full-time job, you do have time for this because you find time that works for you and you try to bake it in. That's the whole point of having a Vanguard, right? You try to bake it into your normal day-to-day activities. Now, I know it's not a perfect science. Playing human Tetris is really hard, but I know that Eric and Amy and the team really try to find matches where you're on at least the same teaching schedule as the other person, right? And so that helps. But if that doesn't happen for you, that doesn't mean you can't ever connect. Just got to get creative. So curious, I heard, again, as we started, some of those fun things that people were doing pre-pandemic, like brunch and blended learning. But would you guys come off mute with other things that you felt were great as far as like finding time to meet with your coach when you were receiving that support? Or ideas that you have that are original? If you need to like copyright them in the chat, you can do that too. Because I love brunch and blended learning. Like that has to be a thing we all do now. Anybody else? I'm just going to write brunch. Everyone eats brunch. We can meet and talk about it at brunch. What else? What other? Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, I was the one who was talking about brunch. And the thing I liked about that is it wasn't just my coach and myself. She also invited 3 other coaches and their mentees. So it was really nice to have a group of Vanguards, different cohorts, different contents and grades. To have a whole group of people just sharing was really a cool experience and a good way to kick off the coaching year.
It's sort of like I'm not Greek, but it's sort of like that Greek life. Like I have a big and a little, and we're all doing this thing together, minus the hazing. Don't do anything weird. But I do think it's cool to think about the life cycle of just accumulating a smaller group within the wide group of Vanguard, where you do have that connection to sort of, grandfathered experience. So I love that. And yeah, like it doesn't have to always be, now this might not be the party line to toe. I know it should happen during the school hours, but like most of the time when we meet with people casually, like if you all have kids, meet up at the park and talk for 5 minutes about what you've been doing in your classroom. Like you can do these things in a more organic way, pandemic not provided. Eric, did you want to slap my hand on that one, or are you okay with that?
Not at all, actually. We have so part of the stipend, you know, we build time into your Vanguard stipend, 2 hours per month, not only to work on micro credentials and to work through things, but to have meetings with your mentee, to follow up, to do those things. So that's part of the coaching role. And of course, on the mentee side, it's part of that as well. So yeah, absolutely. I think there's probably time built in after your workday that, you know, you are getting compensated for as part of that Vanguard stipend.
Yeah, I love that. I did not know that small feature. So if you're ever recruiting new participants, I'd love to do that. That's awesome. Okay, anybody else on this topic before we move forward? It's just something I think we got to call out. You know, you're probably going to have the feeling and emotion at some point like, this isn't even my job, right? Back it down, chill it out, reflect back on those 2 hours, go to brunch with people, you'll feel better about life. Okay, this one's a little bit bigger. So myth 2, either that we tell ourselves or that we hear from other people, is that other teachers don't want to learn from me or won't do what I suggest. Anybody want to drop in the chat any response to this or come off mute? While I'm waiting for people to respond, I'm just going to categorically say that this is otherwise known as imposter syndrome. And the best of us have it. I think the first call I had with Eric after I got this job at Microsoft, I told him how I feel like a ding dong every single day. And you don't feel like you have anything worthy to share or that anyone should be listening to what you say. So that's part of it, right? Is like our own, and we talked about that yesterday, the negative self-talk. Like you got to create a space for yourself where you're at least as kind to yourself as you are to other people, if not more so. So that's the first thing to debunk there. But the second is you probably will have people who are resistant to working with you. I hope not, because they're going to be enrolling in this opportunity just like others, but you might encounter someone who has a shift in their life, you know, sort of something stressful comes up, or, you know, something happens and this becomes less important to them, or they don't want to engage. And that can be challenging. So Jonathan says, feel that this applies to some teachers, but teachers that have signed up for Vanguard want to learn. Exactly right. So I think this is less a reality for you all as it compared to maybe some other groups. You know, when I was leading I Teach, we got brought in by either district level folks or school level administrators. And so we had to go on like a circus week of just trying to get people wanting to like us, trust us, and want to work with us. And so that enrollment phase was really difficult, and we spent a lot of time doing that. For you all, you kind of are able to jump that hurdle. So that's a great point. That's my version of a hurdle. And here's me, yay, jumping over it. Okay, so we've debunked that myth. Cindy says, though, yeah, definitely have imposter syndrome, and I have to work to overcome it. We all do. And like we talked about yesterday, the only way you break a habit is to form a new one. So affirmations, trying to get yourself into a headspace where you stop yourself and say, does it really matter if it's big things that are stressful? And also, would I be this kind to other people? If the answer is, I would be more kind, then get yourself up to that level. Let's see. I had this, oh, I love that. Vanguard makes me feel like I do have something to offer. You do. Without Vanguard, you do. But with Vanguard, you have even more. So that's an amazing piece of feedback. I had this exact thought when I moved to elementary school. I didn't have much experience with the younger ones, and my position felt very closed off from everyone. Then we hit the crazy March, and people saw that I could be helpful and they could learn from me. It became much more of a collaborative partnership. Yeah, so don't waste a crisis, right? I think all of us through this year who are passionate about ed tech or work in that field, we want to carpe the crisis. We want to take advantage of, even if there's just one small glimmer of opportunity and positivity that can come out of this, is that people realize now blended learning isn't going anywhere. We really need to upskill ourselves as educators and have more of a professional approach to this, so people will naturally want to work with you. Lack of connection with others causes me to struggle more with imposter syndrome. Yeah, I agree with you. And this virtual stuff is so much harder. We've all gotten really creative with ways that we can still connect and build relationships and rapport, but hopefully as we start into the fall and you all are back a little bit more on campus and be able to connect with people that way, even though right now I know you're doing this crazy synchronous thing, maybe the pressure valve will come back down a little bit. Let's see, best ways to get the laggards to jump on board when coaching is to use their work lessons as an example. That's right, fake it till you make it. Even if it sucks, you put it out there in front and say, this is great, let's do more. Let's see, yeah, love it. Okay, this is great. Okay, guys, I love all of this. The love that's being shared in the chat is fantastic. So happy about that. So we can kind of debunk myth 2 also. They want to learn, they just don't know they want to learn from you yet. And you guys are going to jump that hurdle because these folks want to be able to get in there and do it. All right. So myth 3, I won't be able to observe them in action. How can I be an effective coach? So some of you talked a little bit about this. How many of you put a number 1 in the chat if your mentor, your coach was able to physically observe your teaching or virtually observe, like, you know, jump on a Google Meet in? Lots of people. Good. Okay, so 2 things I'll say about that. Observation does not have to be synchronous. I know that we think it does, but having a teacher set up a Google Meet of their classroom and recording it, even if you're not live on the other side of it and shooting it to you, still counts. So work around it. We've figured out lots of ways to work around it. The second thing I would say is that I sometimes get a much more distilled version of reality when I ask someone to walk me through how their 50-minute period went, so I don't have to listen to all the ums and the rustling of papers and the waiting for kids to get on to the next task. Like, I'm a teacher too, like I know that all happens, but I don't need that as part of the coaching. I need to see the setup for whatever we're doing, the deployment of whatever we're doing, and then how it was closed out or reflected upon. Those little meaty pieces are the pieces that I want. The rest of the gristle is just class in action, and like, I'm not trying to be crazy big brother over top of the class all the time. So I actually think like talking through a class and having the teacher sort of metacognate that with you during a planning session is sometimes even more valuable. I wouldn't say do it all the time if you can help it, but I love that approach. And then also setting up the meet, project it on your class, you know, flip your thing around and just record it. Just for the snippet that you really are asking for, right? Have them just kind of pull together that one activity or the one thing they're trying that you've been coaching and supporting them to. So great. Yeah, Kathleen says that your coach did that. Can you come off mute, Kathleen, and talk a little bit? Or Kathy, if you go by that. Or Kate.
Yeah,
Katie.
it's Katie.
Katie.
Yeah.
I knew it was something and I couldn't remember. Go ahead, Katie.
So I had a coach that was actually somebody I had worked with before, but we were at different schools. And she came in and she observed my classroom and she looked at what I've been doing. And I've been doing a lot of playlists and a lot of in-class flipped. And she said, well, is there a reason you haven't tried a station rotation? And I said, oh, I don't know. And so she said, well, just what are you planning for next week? And so she had me talk her through how I did it and then said, okay, now set it up as a station rotation. And then she came back the next week, not in person, but we talked. And she's like, had me do that exactly. And that's still one of my favorite lessons. Like, it had some glitches the first time I did it.
Yeah.
But I've used it every semester since. Well, not this semester because I'm not teaching that class, but.
Right. Good. See, so it was really effective for you. And I think that's the other thing, and this is sort of point 3 if you've been paying attention to points, is that by air, by land, by sea. That's like, you know, the traditional mechanism. If you can't hit it one way as a coach, you try another way. If that doesn't work, you try another way, right? And that's going to have to be a little bit customized and personalized based on the person that you're interacting with, their schedule, your schedule, their comfortability, your comfortability, etc. So there's all these factors, but that's a great example of a coach just trying by air, by land, by sea. Let's talk it through. Let's do it physically, or let's do it asynchronously, whatever works for you. because we really want to just get to the meat of that. Go ahead, Melissa.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I kind of have a question. Gosh, I hope it doesn't sound dumb, but so I agree with you in that I think someone coming to observe your classroom without the conversation really doesn't do any good. Now, is there ever a point where, as a coach, you go into someone's room, you observe, or they walk you through, and you really don't have any suggestions? Do you come across that a lot? Does it?
It happens, yeah. It happens for sure.
Should you try to pull something to give them? Because I feel like when you don't get any feedback, you leave still kind of empty. I still need a pat on the back, or I need
That's why this, right? Because this will help you give feedback even when you don't think you have any. So I had to develop that muscle. That's a muscle just like anything else. And it's not the trite feedback that you can maybe sign off on a kid and they feel like they got an attaboy or an attagirl and they're moving forward, right? It has to, you're talking about adults, and like the andragogy of that is different than the pedagogy of teaching. And so I think, again, with empathy, you would want very specific and targeted feedback, right? Like that's something that I think a lot of people as teachers want. They don't want just an observation, somebody to come in and give them a Post-it note that says, great job, on top of their lesson plan book. Like that's not what we're after. So I think a couple of things. First, if you don't have feedback because things just went well, then say, listen, I think we've executed on this. And, I'm glad to see that you're progressing. You'll continue to make small tweaks and improvements. And I think that's good. Let's set the next goal, right? So that's a good time to convert to the next goal. If they don't have a goal quickly at hand, something that I love to do is like sort of projecting future self. So let's envision it's, 2 months from now, you walk into your classroom, like you had none of the barriers that you have today or the constraints. What's this lesson that you've been cooking on in your brain, or you've been thinking about, or just something that you're really passionate about that you want to be able to find time to do or find a way to do? And so those passion projects kind of goals can be really exciting and exhilarating in those moments too. And I think what they convey is also a level of trust. If you're having those conversations, then you are conveying that you trust this educator to like do the basics, right? Like if we're talking about the Maslow's teaching hierarchy, like you're doing teaching and learning well. We've pushed on blended learning and like you're executing on that and you're making progress. Now let's think about blended learning plus. Like what are the pipe dream projects, the passion driven projects that you really want to be able to try? And that's where coaching gets cool, because then you go out and research what other people are doing. You think about your own practice, and then you can kind of really start to work collaboratively to put something out there that's really different and exciting. So I hope that answers your question. I have been in that situation more times than I can count, where you're really like, you're fine, you're doing great. Or the feedback that I have, it has to be critical or crucial. And in those moments, it can be just, I have to go back to my resources and like plan ahead those conversations. And so frequently I'll say, I need some time to like think and debrief and resource myself before we kind of talk about, today's lesson and how it went. I want you to do the same too. So like, here's 3 questions I want you to think about. I'm going to think about the same 3 questions, and then we'll meet again. So don't be afraid to put the pause in it intentionally too, because that can be a little overwhelming.
Awesome.
Good.
Thank you.
Sure, of course. Okay, I'm going to move on to myth 4. So myth 4 is, this is a big one. I don't teach the same grade or subject, so I don't know what to suggest. All right, I heard some of this in our very opening warm-up when we were in breakout sessions, right? And it's not a critical piece of feedback in the sense of like, well, you can't possibly know what my life is, but it can feel like another missed high five when we have someone who's coaching us that can't step out of self and anonymize a little bit. All right, so this is another point that I want to make. You have to anonymize yourself a little bit. You have to become a little agnostic to grade level and content area. And so you have to be kind of a jack of all trades and a Jane of all trades. That doesn't mean that you need to know everybody's standards in and out, but this is a great way to form that partnership philosophy and partnership approach. You're going to be expert at your content and your grade level, right? That's where I need you to hold me accountable. I'm going to come in with ideas that push blended learning forward, that push progress forward. And we need to meet and match and battle it out to make both of those fit together to be successful. I have coached people in classrooms from pre-K, in like an MOID, severe and profound disabilities setting, all the way up to like high school AP physics, where the guy told me during our first meeting that he rebuked my theories. Used the word rebuked, like I work with the devil. Okay, so like I've heard it all, I've been with everybody. And at the end of the day, yeah, I'm just a Spanish teacher, right? Like I think it's like really important also to have the humility to say like, I don't have to be an expert in pre-K or fourth grade language arts or in high school math to be an effective coach, because I'm going to ask you great questions. I'm going to let you lead on content and grade level if that's not my area of expertise, but I'm going to push in the ways that I feel like I can push, with my area of focus being, in your case, blended learning. So I think that we can debunk that myth by just saying, in a partnership, and again, we want to be a learn-it-all and know that we have as much to learn as we have to show. So if you marry those two things here, I think that we actually eliminate this myth. But I'm curious what you might think about this as well. And if you've had those moments where the coach that you've been interacting with didn't do a good job of kind of making themselves more agnostic and like backing out of, well, here's what I would do in my classroom. That's kind of a trick lead in. I don't know that I would use that much. People don't actually want to know what you would do in your classroom when you're coaching them. They want to know how you can help them in theirs. So it's really hard to step out of that, like, well, here's what I would do, so you should do it too. And into a place of like, tell me what's been effective or what's worked for you in the past. Here's some great ideas. Let's match them up. So let's see, what kinds of comments do you guys have? Let me frame it a little bit more targeted. Do you feel as though you've had an interaction with somebody that was not your grade level, grade band, or content area specific, that you felt a little let down by what they offered you? 1 for yes, 2 for no. Let's do that in the chat. Oh, we've got a comment here by David. Dave, you want to come off mute and tell us what that's about?
Well, it's kind of a two-part thing. We were just talking about in our breakout rooms, like I was just saying today, like I got done bus duty and then like I found myself in the hallway and looked around and noticed all of us were wearing our purple lanyards and just happened to all be the Vanguard teachers that are at the school. Like we just kind of magnetized towards one another, and I have so much to soak up from them. And like they don't teach what I teach. They teach different students, you know, it's different grade levels. Some of them might even be focused on special education student, you know what I mean? So
yeah,
but that's kind of only debunking the myth for Vanguard. So in general, I just think there's so many coachable topics that are not grade level or curriculum dependent. For example, giving teachers feedback on how they give students feedback. Like I've learned a lot at not just Vanguard meetings, but you know, things at the what's the place called in Walkersville, the Staff Development Center, at various meetings about what high school at the time I was teaching elementary. I learned a lot about how high school and middle school teachers were giving feedback to their students, and I took those little golden nuggets and kind of put them into place, you know, in terms of as an elementary school teacher. So that's just one example, you know, giving feedback. There's so many different things. Yeah. And COVID has leveled the playing field completely. Like we're having coaching conversations about the best way to take attendance at one point in time. You know what I mean? So I really think this is definitely a myth, and whether that you're a Vanguard teacher or not.
Yeah, I agree with you. And it sounds like we've got a more mixed scenario here based on the feedback in the chat. And I think it's probably because the people who were coaching you did not acknowledge that if it's good for me, it's good for you mentality doesn't work in coaching. You know what I mean? It's like did you ever, when you were younger, like and just first started babysitting, show up with like a backpack of like crafts and everything to like occupy children when they went haywire? This was before the time of like small screen occupation of children, where we actually had to play games with kids when we were babysitting, right? And so I remember showing up and like this girl down the street from me who was like 3 years older than me was like, I'm going to help you stock your babysitting backpack. And I was like, cool, that sounds great. She put a bunch of crap in the bag that I didn't even know how to do myself. And so it was like a melee. Like kids were like putting glitter glue on each other's faces. Like it was insane. And it's because what worked for her was not what was going to work for me. I had to take a much more drill sergeant approach, like phys ed kind of approach to babysitting activities. Like we were playing like what time is it, Mr. Fox? Like things where people were falling in line and we were like out of the house where things could break. So I say that to say it's kind of the same thing. I had a lot of things that worked in my classroom because of the type of person I am and the type of personality I have. And I also want to call out here that pedagogy is universal. Good pedagogy stands aside from content. And I want to have a little bit of a challenger moment with you here. This piece, the content, more and more and more becomes automated over time, and more does not become democratized only to the teacher, right? So content itself, being a content or a subject matter expert, while it's valuable and it's passion driven and it's why we get into teaching sometimes, that's actually not what we need to hone our skills on. Content is sometimes really static. What we need to hone our skills on is pedagogy. So if somebody pushes back on you and says like, oh, well, you've never taught, third grade reading, and this is a crucial year for reading progress, and I need something specific for this lexile and this thing. And then you can say to them, it sounds like you have a lot of good resources and experience in that way. I want you to bring that, and like, I can help with delivery, right? Or I can help with how do we set you up for success the first time that you're doing a blended activity with your class? Or do you want to set up the station that you're comfortable leading as the teacher directed station, and I can help you to think about ideas for some of the other stations in our station rotation model, right? So there's a way to authorize that expertise without getting in their way, but stay here. Don't try to pretend to be a content area expert when you're not one. That's super annoying to people. Anybody other feedback here? Eric?
I like the idea of just feeling supported. Like, I wonder how many of you just felt more confident in taking a risk or trying something new. Maybe you had never done a playlist before, and you said, you know what, I'll give that a shot because I know that I have this coach to lean on. I know that I have somebody to ask a question, or I can follow up with the other vanguards in my building, or the other vanguards that I've kind of built in my PLN. And so, I think, you don't even realize it, but as a coach, you're providing that support and being that person to lean on, even if they never run into any trouble and never ask you. Just your presence and that support can certainly be a supporting factor.
Yep, I love that. Great point. Okay, in the sake of time, I'm going to go on to the last myth here. And again, you guys, this is a hurdle that most of you will already have jumped. Let me draw another hurdle because you can never have too many hurdles. Because people are signing up for this, right? They want to be a part of this program. They want to receive the coaching and the support and the resource that comes with it. But if you don't like confrontation, I don't want people to be mean to me, or I don't want to say something mean to somebody else. Good, don't be mean. and don't accept meanness, right? And that's where it becomes really essential to know how to have crucial conversations and provide substantive feedback that's not just good, bad, ugly, right? Feedback that has, I saw, I wonder if, I wish we could do this next. Right? So I wish, I wonder is a great way to frame your feedback. You guys have probably done this a million times in workshops before, but even if those are the 3 ways that you sort of work with your coach, E to start, what's something you liked about your lesson and how it went? What's something you wish you could have done differently or implemented or had gone a different way? And what's a question you still have? Something you're wondering about. So really simple tactic to keep sort of the meanness or feeling like either one of you are coming with any kind of negative emotion. All right, so we're going to transition into resource sharing now. The very first thing is I heard people say, and don't get mad at me for sharing a template that you don't have. You can build this yourself. So something that I love to do is sort of like a persona builder or like a coach intake conversation before we start working on the actual meat and potatoes. So this is a template. You guys can make it yourself, but it's like an intake form. So you introduce yourself and you make a personal connection. The way that you do that is just through having a conversation like, hey, what do you like to do? Like, What have you been doing? Have you been wearing sweatpants for the last year? Where do you like to buy your sweatpants from, right? Like whatever the personal connection is. And so you can actually start to fill this out, like 3 kids, has allergies, like, you know, whatever, like we can laugh about pollen when we're talking, loves her school, right? So somebody who's like really passionate about the school that they're at and like charter member, wants to continue to push it forward. And let's see, like movie buff, right? So like you could talk about movies. So I just like to have a quick conversation and like record some areas where we have some personal connections. You guys are going to have a limited amount, but in the past I've been coaching 40, 50, 60 people at a time. And so it's really helpful for me to like capture this information so that I don't have to feel like a stranger when I'm connecting back with somebody, because nothing makes me more angry than like a lack of authenticity. What you see is what you get with me, whether I've known you for a day or for a year or for my whole life. The next is to get some of this info about them and just capture it in one place. So like, what grade level do you teach? What content area? You know, what clubs do you sponsor? Are you a coach? You know, and what school are you at? You know, is it north of me, south of me? Like how, you know, how far away are you? Can I get to you quickly? Right? So just some basic teaching info. And then these are the 2 awesome ones. Oops, sorry, I'm showing you more things that you don't need right now. Okay, so these are 2 really cool things to have as that initial intake conversation. What do you love about what you do right now? Even in this year. What do you love about the way that you've been teaching lately? If it's not 4 things, take 1. Take whatever they give you. What they love is often a really hard place to touch. So here's a pro tip. Don't mess with things that people love about what they do day 1. That's like taking the entire wheel of cheese and shoving it not just off the plate, but like out the window. Those things that they love about what they do are kind of sacred ground. So it's really difficult as a coach to push in those places. The other section, these pain points, are like, what's the thing you hate? For me, I hated teaching direct object pronouns. Okay, it was like the thing in Spanish that every kid struggled with, and like they couldn't get it, and it was backwards from English, and like, okay, great, I get to like lola, los, las, great. Like for weeks, it was just not fun. Another teacher I taught with was great at it, so I shipped all my kids to her for direct object pronouns, and she sent all of hers to me for reflexives. Like it was, I loved that. I loved doing the like daily routine stuff. I dressed up like Yoda every year and like got in a fake shower. It was like a whole thing. So the point is like the places that they don't love, the places you don't love about your practice, your pacing guide, whatever it is, are safe places to try something new because you're not attached to them. You don't love them. You don't protect them. So iterate there. Find those pain points or those areas where they don't love their practice. And that's a great place to start to challenge some ways that we can use blended learning, right? Higher blended learning to help to make improvements in those areas. So that's just a quick example of one of the things that I use as I'm doing sort of that persona builder. I'm going to actually move you guys back over here for a second and switch screens because I've got some other things to share with you. The first, and I'm just going to share this with you in a forced copy link so you guys can log into this as well. But this is a coaching log template. Now, I'm going to say this, Amy has a great set of resources that she's going to prepare you guys with. So if this contradicts anything that you see from her, always go with what you see from her. But this is a coaching log that I use in my practice. And you can see that the most recent time that I used it, hold on, my child needs my phone and my face to unlock it. The most recent time that I used it was actually in March of last year. On the 18th was my very first day coaching this individual. So I've anonymized it, but I've left the resources and notes so that you can kind of get an understanding for what we were doing. Okay, so I like to have this as a shared collaborative document so that we can just keep it up over time. I have the date we met, or we had a conversation, even if it was just a text. What requests or questions do they have? What resources have you created to meet the needs of the teacher? This is for me. So like, have I built anything, made anything, shared any templates with them? And then notes. And you can see like there's links to things. There's all kinds of stuff that I just keep captured here. I do this for two reasons. One, to document myself, and you guys obviously have micro credentials that you'll be working towards. But the other is that chances are, over time, my cumulative effort for one individual that I'm coaching is actually beneficial to more than just that person. What I found is that the same kinds of questions or asks for resources reoccurred. So I was able to go back to these coaching logs and say, okay, you need something for this. I think I worked with the teacher to do that. Here's a great resource. And I think collaboratively amongst yourselves to be able to just shoot it out and ping the Vanguard crew and say, hey, I'm working with a teacher, middle school, teaches math. Have you been working with anyone in the same way? What resources do you have? Do you have anything that I can sort of noodle on? So in that way, those things are really helpful. And then the last thing that I'll show you, and this is not going to be shocking to you, is to have a great PLN. The one that we started at KSU is open to everybody. So I would say plug in with them. You guys obviously have this like amazing network here inside of Vanguard, but the coaching collab group at KSU is just led by the I Teach coaches who do this at scale across the country. And they often will share resources. They've plugged in with conferences to offer special tracts and trainings. And so it just always feel like you should reach out to others and ask, right? Back to that point, be a learn-it-all, not a know-it-all, because that can really save the day for you and save face when you're not trying to be the person who knows everything, but has a great network and a great mechanism by which to accomplish those things. So again, those are some quick ideas and templates for you. I'm going to stop presenting and I'm going to kind of just give you the real talk version here in a second, but curious to access. I'll get that right now. Hold on. Let me fix that before we go on. Change link to everyone. Done. All right. You should be able to click refresh and get it. Let me know if not. Good. Thanks. Okay. Sorry, it's been a minute since I've been in Google, you guys. This is what happens when you don't do something repeatedly. It's like riding a bike. So I want to just ask and see if there were mechanisms like I'm showing you, like when you were being coached, what kinds of experiences did you have to like get to know the person that was going to be your coach? Did you have a log where you were keeping track of things like this? What were some of the ways that you felt like you experienced this? And then I don't want to put you on the spot, Amy, but I'd love to just hear from you like a high level, what they can expect from sort of a templates and resources perspective as they move into next year. So anyone want to share what they experienced as a coachee? No, they don't want to. Okay, Amy, you're up. All right, go ahead, Jonathan. You got it. Go ahead.
I was just going to share, I was sharing with my group earlier, like when it was Kent Wetzel was my coach, I was really fortunate to have him. And so I just like, he came with like, and I kept asking for like, what else, what more ideas? This wasn't him pouring a bunch of ideas on me, but like, I probably ended up with like 24 ideas, just writing down things I could have fixed. And it was just a sheet of paper, right? And so I'm still looking at that piece of paper like, oh, I can also fix this. So he just poured a bunch of stuff, but really just writing down on whatever, I get my hands on at the time. It was a piece of notebook paper. I still have that paper, so.
One thing I saw a few years ago, Alex Owen, I don't think is on the call, but he had Tiffany Malagari as his coach, and one of the things that Tiffany did was just sort of opened up okay, Alex, so you're on, so like tell me if I'm wrong, but Tiffany kind of opened up a Google Doc and just shared it with you, and you would meet, or whether it was just a quick chat or you would trade an email or something, and she would just document in there. And then my understanding was that Alex, you could just add stuff in there too. And so you both were able to kind of keep a running log of the conversations that you had, and I think it served two really nice purposes. One, you could point to the growth through the year, right? Like these were the level, even in just the type and the level of questions that you were asking in August and September, and look at the type of questions that you're asking in April and May and how far we've come. And then for micro-credential purposes, it served really nicely for the coach. You know, she was able to sort of have a built-in artifact as well of, you know, here's the evidence of the conversations that we're having, that kind of thing. So Alex, please, you know, jump in on that side of things, whether you have, but the point being, whether you have a coaching template, coaching log like Stephanee shared with us tonight, or you just simply open up a Google Doc and kind of keep record, it might be useful. But Alex, did I kind of capture that correctly? Knowing that you're on the call, please jump in.
It was kind of just a great running record of all our meetings, and I guess it was a pre-COVID, pre-Google Meet world where it was just how we met. If we couldn't, because she was a high school teacher and I was a middle school teacher, and we couldn't really meet together at the same time, but we could meet over that Google Doc.
Yep, that's an excellent point. And that's actually, so some of the things you'll see in here, as far as the asks column in the template, are actually things that these teachers are putting in ahead of time. And then I love the assign feature in comments in Google. So they would just assign it to me and then it shows up on my tasks, right? So I know as I'm doing my daily work that I just have this that I need to kind of think about and respond to ahead of our next meeting. So again, that's a great asynchronous way without having to physically meet with somebody or physically observe them, to have that ongoing dialogue and have some things that you can be working on to like answer low-hanging fruit questions or be researching, you know, solutions to things or ideas ahead of time. So yeah, I love that. And I hope that you guys will like make this your own. If it's something that's helpful to you, like, please don't feel like it, you know, you can't jack it up. That's why I made you force a copy. So do what you need to do with this if it's helpful. And I just liked having in one place where I could like easily have their Twitter accessible too. I love being able to give like shiny tweets to people when they're doing great work or when they've like really put some great noodling or mental effort behind something. Just calling them out for that effort, like broadly, is I love doing that, and I think it's really important. So that's the final phase that I want to kind of give you some tips and tricks with, is actually affirmation, and how to kind of build those relationships. So we started off, if you'll remember yesterday, with really thinking about I am because you, right? I don't want you to lose sight of how that moment or those moments of gratitude make you feel. And then also how impactful that can be in the life of a teacher in a classroom who's being coached and really has no idea if they're doing the right thing at the right time or whatever. So I'd love to just have a swarm of ideas that get populated into the chat right now of ways that you can give positivity, give affirmation, whether it's a tweet or it's just, you know, some happy mail that you physically send, you know, a note to them. Let's just start dropping some things in the chat, and I'll give you some of my ideas as well. So obviously I gave you the idea with a tweet that I do all the time. I've also really liked to just kind of part of my intake is to like get their favorite snacks ideas, like things that are like $2 or less, right? You could go to like Five Below or the dollar store and get a candy bar and a drink. Also, when we're physically in schools, I love to just carry a pouch of quarters around with me. I sound like a janitor when I'm walking up and down the halls, but you know, when you're like at a school and you're like ready to wring the neck of a beautiful child, we would never do that. But you like get hangry in the afternoon and you have no quarters in your desk drawer and you're ready to like beg, borrow, and steal a piece of candy or like a bag of chips. So I like to leave vending machine money when I come into a classroom and just put 4 quarters with a Post-it note that says, "Great job, thanks for letting me come today." So just little things that that number one, acknowledge that you know the hard work that happens, right? I think vending machine money is like actually sends a loud and clear message that I know what it's like to be stuck in this classroom for 8 hours and like have to go to the bathroom so bad that you would like fake a kidney stone just to be able to go, and let alone get a snack that you like. So just some great things like that. Ooh, Lindsay, tell me about courier gifts. Is this like secret gifting pal, like where you have somebody else bring it to them so they don't know it's you?
So getting gifts in the courier can be like super exciting. I don't know about anybody else, but when I get stuff in my mailbox or like even like a package, like my secretary will send me an email and I have a random package, it's very, very exciting. I just got a random package the other day from another PE teacher in the county, and it was like a funny gift from like an inside joke that we had when we were running CPR one day, and it just kind of made my day.
That's so cool. I didn't know you called it courier. Yeah, like inter-office mail is what I would have called it back in the day. So yeah, I love that. I also love this idea of the email that copies the principal. Yeah, geez, like, do you ever feel like it's so hard to like, you know, shine a light on your own practice when you're doing great things? Because it still feels weird, right? We talked about that yesterday. It still feels weird to talk about how great we are, but having somebody else talk about how great we are, everybody loves that. Love that. Let's see, personalized notes. Yeah, and there's like lots of really fun stuff. Kudo box, that's a really great one. I've seen that before too. I'm gonna have to remember the name of it or find it and tell you guys, but there's like these great little pop-out note cards. They come in a pack of 50, and it's like a little like peekaboo book, but it has quotes or like inspirational things in it. So sometimes I'll just stuff that in like a scratch and sniff sticker in a note card and like send it to people, because don't underestimate the power of scratch and sniff. Like that, if you want to really like relive your childhood, get a pack of scratch and sniff. So yeah, don't forget that part, right? And that's part of like closing the loop. You're asking for trust, you're developing a relationship in trust, and you want to be like grateful for that on the end. And so don't forget that final piece of the loop, because that will, to our earlier point, help to build the relationship where you feel like that continues after this sort of mandated coaching year, where you still have that relationship and that, you know, sort of collegiality that will help you both grow moving forward. So, I love that. Talk to their students. Yeah. So the last thing I'll end on is like, I used to give time. Time's a really precious gift. And it's also a 4-letter word, which obviously, but like the kind with a asterisk in the middle of it for teachers. Time is really hard to come by. And so if you are in a position, which many of you aren't yet, but if you are ever in a position where you have time that someone else doesn't, offering to stand in on a duty station for them is like you've given them a golden nugget. Letting them run to the restroom or, you know, go use their vending machine coins while you're doing some crazy activity with their kids. Yes, do that. Offer to come in and run one of the stations with them during their first go at station rotation, so that they have a safety net with them and feel protected. And again, the name of the game here is getting them to focus on what's safe enough to try. You are their chief motivation officer. You're a peer, you're a colleague, you're a coach. But you are also that person that says, you know what, this is safe enough to try. Nothing's going to break here. We're going to be fine. And even if it's not perfect, we're going to get through it together. So remember those points that we talked about through today, and you're going to be great. And you have the amazing support of, you know, Eric and Amy as you move forward. So Amy, I'll kick it to you to just give them like a Cliff's Notes version of what they can expect as far as resources, so that they don't feel like they need to go and like build their own binder.
Thanks for passing that over. Yeah.
It's a rave. Pick up the glow stick and go.
So I can't obviously be as exciting as Dr. Stephanee Stephens is, but I'm going to try my best to give you a little glimpse into what we have in store for you in your coaching year. We've really designed it with a team, first of all. So as everything is in Vanguard, it's all designed by Vanguard voices. So we had a great team come together for this coaching guide. It really embodies this idea of where you're at in relation to the work of a coach. And it takes us through the phases that we all go through when we start something new, just much like our new teachers and much like all of us during this past special year, we'll call it. We all go through some anticipation, we go through survival, we go through disillusionment. We also go through rejuvenation, reflection, anticipation. So all over again, matter of fact. So it's aligned that way. We have some good resources in there for you, from templates on building those relationships, logs, and obviously if what Stephanee works for you in a log, that's awesome. It's about having something that works for everyone in the partnership, because it is a partnership. Most importantly, I think the key to understand is it is job embedded. So I think a lot of our coaches worry about their own micro credentials and serving their mentees. And I want you to know it's all baked into the coaching guide. So if you follow the coaching guide and you work through that with your mentee is going to get what they need, and you're going to get what you need for your micro credentials, and it all works out. And with that shared, I'll pass it back to Eric and Stephanee.
Yeah, I will just add one thing to say that the coaching guide is going to be given to you during our May forum. So we're together one more time this year. And so we're going to give that to you ahead of time so that you have a chance to, go through it, read through things, and just kind of become familiar with it before you're actually, so that you have more than, 3 days before you're assigned a mentee. So your mentees will come in the fall. Usually we assign those in September. And so, but wanted to give you that heads up that you'll get a hold of this coaching guide in May.
Perfect. All right, well, I want to end really quickly with just a quick check-in. I see everyone slumped shoulders and turned necks, and we need to get some quick alignment before we go back today. So we're going to just do a really quick left and right ear to shoulder movement here. Lean that neck down, and then everybody raise your hands all the way up to the sky. Cross them over. Turn them, and reach back behind you. Ooh, that was my left shoulder going. Okay. That feels good. All right, wiggle out your arms, wiggle your wrists. All right, I want to just again say how thankful I am that you guys trust me with your time. I really have an emotional connection with you all. I'm totally invested in your success. I know that we will have a Q&A session, and Eric will kind of remind us of that as we go out. And I wanted to just incentivize first person in the door during that session. It just arrived today, straight from their workshop in Tennessee, is this ornament, hand-stitched by Brad Montague's wife of the Dumpster Fire and the Garden, straight from Montague Workshop. So this will ship out to you in a really cute box if you're the first person in for the Q&A. Eric and Amy don't count.
Oh,
Thank
man.
you so much. Yeah.
No, that's awesome. Yeah, Q&A time with Stephanee on Tuesday, the 27th. That is 1:30 to 3:30. This same link. Of course, I'll send an email reminder. But absolutely, if you want to follow up and just talk, we can just chat about life, about leadership, coaching, or specifically, your personalized learning questions and goals. Specific lessons. We can chat about all those things. We want to be here for you as a resource. So join us for 10 minutes or for the entire 2 hours. That's completely up to you. Optional next Tuesday, the 27th, 1:30 to 3:30.
Awesome. I hope to see you guys there. If not, I wish you rest and rejuvenation over the summer. I thank you all for your time and have an awesome afternoon, okay? Bye, all.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.